Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Getting back to work on the Cobra in this video. Last video, which I finished up yesterday, I got the intake manifold installed, torqued it down, but I wanted to let it sit overnight, and I'm going to go through it and retorque everything, make sure everything's to spec because they tend to settle, and some of the bolts might loosen up a little bit over time. So going to get to work on that, and then once that's done, it's going to be continuing to bolt things back on the engine, get everything back together. So I can get to the point of firing up this new EFI setup. That's obviously the ultimate goal. So I'm gonna go ahead, get the camera turned around, and get back to work. All right, just went around. It actually took 3 more passes on the intake bolts in order to get them all to 24 foot-pounds where nothing moved at all. It just clicked. So, but everything is now set where it needs to go. Everything is torqued, so I'm gonna go ahead, do a little cleanup of a few smudges and stuff that are on the intake manifold from putting the bolts in, get those cleaned up, wiped off, and then I will probably start working on getting the valve covers in place. All right, so yeah, I wiped up the stuff I need to wipe up. I also went ahead and hooked the fuel line back up so that's no longer having to be shoved out of the way to avoid spillage. That's all tightened in place, and I also kind of started running, there's the tube that goes to the tube and the sensor for sending unit for the water temperature gauge, kind of laid that out a little bit and started messing with some of the wiring, getting it out of the way. But yeah, next on the list, and do a little cleanup, wipe off these rocker arms again, put some oil on them, then I can go ahead and put the valve covers on. All right, so before I put the valve covers on, what I'm gonna do is go over everything, just wipe it down real quick, make sure there's no debris or whatnot that's stuck or sitting on any of the parts. And then I'm gonna run some oil down all the trunnions. I'll basically just drizzle a little bit, like right in this area on all the rockers, just get some oil on the pivot points. The other ends, the roller ball and where the push rod hits, those have assembly lube from when I installed them. But just get a little oil in the trunnion area. I do have an oil pump primer attachment for my drill, and I will be doing that once everything's sealed up before I'm ready to get this thing running, just so that way I make sure that everything's good and pre-lubed before firing it up. But I at least want to, like I said, get a little oil on those trunnions so it can soak into the pivot points in the time being. So that's what I'm gonna do for now. Get everything cleaned up, put a little oil down, use some brake clean on all the surfaces that the gasket will seal against, and then we can get the cover installed. All right, everything's wiped down. You can see there's some oil sitting there from me pouring it over the rockers. Gasket's in place. I'm gonna go ahead, grab the cover, put it on, get everything tightened down, and this side will be done. All right, cover's in place and the bolts are loosely snugged. I'm gonna go ahead and get everything torqued down. 13 foot-pounds, which equates to 156 inch-pounds using quarter drive torque wrench. So I'm gonna go ahead, get this torqued. There's no real specific procedure to do it as far as order, so I just kind of go around, work it in slowly, and get it torqued. So I'm gonna go ahead and get this one finalized. All right, and all torqued to under 156 inch-pounds. I ended up doing the 2 center ones first, then this one, then that one. So it was kind of working from the inside out, similar to how you do everything else. I just kind of figured that's probably the best way to do it, even though the guide doesn't really say anything specific. So did that order, and then I came back into the 2 center ones just one more time just to make sure they hadn't loosened up or anything, which they did not. So good to go. I'm gonna go ahead and do all the same work on the other side and get that valve cover installed. All right, and driver side is done as well. Same process as the other side. Also went ahead and added, these are 9mm plug wire holders. They're aftermarket ones I bought off eBay and they'll fit the motorsport wires I have. So one of those on each valve cover. So got those mounted and installed. So that is done. On to the next. All right, and continuing on with putting things back to how they were. Went ahead, I vacuumed up some of the debris that was sitting on top of the timing gear cover back there behind the water pump. That's all cleaned up. And then, as you can see, I reinstalled the coil, got the wires hooked back up to that, and then reran the harness that goes underneath the intake manifold that's coming out back there to get plugged back into the ECU, or to get plugged into the ECU once I have everything finalized in that area. So next thing, I do need to do the installation of the water temp gauge. It's just loosely in its fitting. Need to put some sealer on that, get that tightened up, and then I will continue on. I think I need to get a few things mounted on the passenger side over there. Those wires that are hanging down are part of the new ECU EFI system. I just need to get those screwed into or mounted on the frame rails up there. So I'm gonna get to work on that. All right, been working on the passenger side here, and you can see I have the relay and the fuse for the EFI system now mounted. I mounted it into the frame right there. And then I also ran the wiring along the firewall, added a couple cushion clamps to hold everything in place, and we're good to go there. So wiring is nicely routed. Yeah, I may unplug and just kind of reroute the two connectors there just to, put them in a little better spot. I might put a cushion clamp like on that stud there or something like that, just to kind of hold them to the engine, make it a little more organized, but it's at least, kind of where it's supposed to be. So that is another thing off the list as far as cleanup goes. All right, so now that I've got that all kind of cleaned up there, next thing I need to clean up is that wire you see hanging down there for the O2 sensor. So that's a pretty good length of wire, and then there's also probably a good couple feet of wire that comes off the sensor itself. So that's a lot of slack that's going to have to be in this area. So what I'm thinking I'm going to do is go ahead and put a cushion clamp right around here, because where the O2 sensor is kind of lines up with the number 1 port, which is right around there. Put a cushion clamp here so I can run the wire, have it tied up here so it's not dangling down on the exhaust. And then any slack, I can probably do a second larger cushion clamp here, bundle it up and just kind of have it tucked under there. So that way it's out of the way and it's not hanging down, getting on any hot exhaust. So I think I'm gonna go ahead, get a couple clamps installed, drilled and whatnot, and be good for those. You can also see there's some old holes that are on here that I've got black rivets, and I'm gonna try and fill those in with the black rivets. It's just from previous catch cans and stuff that were on this car from the previous build that no longer apply. So I'm gonna go grab clamps, screws, and get those started. All right, so I went ahead, I put a hole right around here in the bottom, and then there's one here for a couple of cushion clamps. What I'll do is I'll have the wire coming off the O2 sensor, come up into a small cushion clamp here, and then it can arc back around, and then I can go ahead and connect it, and then just have the bundle of wires kind of tied together here, and then it'll go through one more cushion clamp right here just to keep everything going in the right direction where it wraps up and around over there. So gonna go ahead, I need to get the header, get it cleaned up and ready to go, and then I can go ahead and install this side of the exhaust and then start working those lines in. I also did go ahead and grab the black rivets that I was talking about and put them in the holes. I mean, they still don't look great, but it's better than seeing rusty holes. So it's better than nothing. I've got, there's a lot of holes in this thing from previous owner doing multiple different things over time. There's, some in the crossbar there. I think the oil filter was mounted there at one point in time, and then they moved it to the frame where it is now. But yeah, I just have to fill those holes in as best I can. So anyway, go ahead, clean up the header, and start getting that installed. All right, went over and wiped everything down with mechanics wipes to get any dirt and stuff off the backside as best as possible. It's old, it's got some corrosion on the J-pipe and stuff, it is what it is. But and then I also went over the flange for the header using that wire wheel on the drill, clean off any of the old graphite from the old gasket. I'm gonna go ahead and install the new gasket in place, and then we can get this exhaust installed. Or I'm sorry, I'm not gonna install it, I'm gonna get the 2 end bolts in the exhaust, get it kind of loose in place, then I can drop the gasket in. Got that backwards. So 1 second, I'm gonna get this put into place. All right, update time. As you can see, everything is loosely in place using 1415 header gaskets. And as you can see, these are the ones that you should be able to get the 2 end bolts in and then drop the gasket behind. Unfortunately, with these heads and where the lip is for the valve covers, you can kind of see there through the hole. That is not an option. There was not enough room to do that. So it was a fight to get these in place. If you're doing these with the entire exhaust attached, it is not easy. You'll need a couple of jack stands and a lot of patience. But I basically put one in the center holding the gasket to the exhaust manifold, and that way I could hold the tab on this end and just try and keep the gasket aligned as I was pushing up against the engine. Got that one ever so slightly started, put an end one in here, put the end one in there, and just kind of worked my way around and slowly got them into place. So now I'm going to go through and get everything tightened, and then we can wrap up this side by getting the wires bundled up once everything is tightened in place. All right, and everything is snugged down pretty good. This was done using a quarter drive with a 3/8 socket, a 3/8 box wrench with a 12-point end, as well as a 3/8 crow's foot and a 3/8 drive ratchet. I also, if you remember, I don't know if you follow my channel, you would have seen in a video a few months ago where I put Nord locks on here before I started this head swap. That'll help from keeping these bolts from rotating back out. So yeah, everything's snugged down pretty much tight as I can get them, using the tools that I have. Some of these are easy to get. Something on these two center ones, the ones to the right on the two center tubes, you have to have a crow's foot. You can't get a box wrench closed end around it, and you run out of space with the open end of the box wrench, and you can't get a socket on them. So that is my pointer on how to get the header bolts on. So those are done. I'm gonna go ahead and get the O2 sensor wire hooked up and clamped into place and run how I want it to run, and then we will be done with this side. All right, and here we are. Wiring is all bound up. You can see I had to kind of back some of it up there and zip tie it to the main harness, and then we got it dropping down there, and you see it follows the two wires that go to the back of the car for power and the fuel pump, and I have it zip tied there, and that's the connection for the O2, and then you see the O2 wire there running along as needed into the top of the J-pipe. So everything is properly bound up, out of the way. I'm very happy with how this side turned out, and that pretty much wraps up the passenger side of getting the exhaust together. Definitely a lot easier having the vent open and not having that access hole. Just gonna throw that out there. But yeah, so pretty happy with how everything is on this side. Next is going to be getting the driver's side header installed. All right, and here's the passenger or the driver's side all cleaned up. Went over the manifold with wire brush, same as the other side, wiped everything down, brake clean on the mating surface, and then just used the mechanic wipe on the actual pipe itself just to get any old residue off. Brake clean on the cylinder head, so I'm gonna go ahead, wrestle this into place and start getting it installed. All right, and header is in place loosely. All the bolts are loosely in place with the gasket where it needs to be, same as the other side. I'm gonna go through, get everything tightened down again. Just pretty much tighten it as much as I can. I've got the Nord locks on all the bolts. This side, remember that the fourth one from the front is where the dipstick tube will have to be held in, cinched in place. That bolt should be a longer bolt to allow for the dipstick tube, at least how my setup it is. I do have one that's slightly longer there. So just remember that when you're putting everything together. So I'm gonna go ahead, get everything torqued down and put in place for good, and then we can call the exhaust done. All right, and all set. I've got the bolts holding everything in place there. For the hanger, double jam nutted on there, so that's good to go. And then everything here is torqued down pretty much just as tight as I can get it by hand. Just for the most part on this, just used a 3/8 box wrench, both ends of that. That was the best way. Things are definitely tighter on this side versus the other side. The other side I could use a 1/4-inch ratchet with a socket on it and an extension. Didn't have the space to do that over here because all the brake lines and the steering shaft and whatnot. So, but yeah, everything is snugged down as pretty much as tight as I can get it with the 3/8 box wrench. And with the Nord locks, should be good to go. I just have to put the dipstick in the tube. That's all in place as well. But that should wrap up getting the exhaust on. All right, with that, I think I am going to call this video done. It's gone on long enough, got a lot done in this one. The exhaust is all wrapped up, so that is a big plus. Next video on the Cobra, I'll probably start tackling the front of the motor, or front of the engine. I have a new alternator that I'd ordered. I'm going to get that installed with all the bracketry and everything, and then I need to start plumbing the cooling system. Get that all taken care of. Also ordered spark plugs for it. Need to get those in the cylinder heads because they are different plugs versus what a regular Mustang uses. The TrickFlow calls for a slightly different plug. So get those installed and just continuing getting everything put back together so I can get this thing to fire up. So as always, if you're interested in following along, please hit like, please hit subscribe, please hit the notification bell. Definitely helps with the algorithm, and I do appreciate it. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comment section. I do review them. I will reply, and again, those help with the algorithm as well. And that being said, thank you very much for watching, and have a great day.